Hello YouTube, and especially Mark, Rabbit95823. This is Lesser Cronish Strolling Bones, and I'm going to do a video response to a video response that you made for a backstory video, a player backstory video, that was originally made by The Outsider68, aka Sean Connors. This is one of my favorite GM tip videos that he does because this is of the highest import. Backstory in a player is vital. It is essentially the driving engine behind role-playing games. It's called a role-playing game for a reason. It's called ROLE playing for a reason, not ROLL playing for a reason. Although some people do prefer the latter. But essentially, we are telling a story when we sit around the table together as a team. So every single person at that table needs to have a link to the story. They have to have a reason to be there. So the two questions that you brought up are imperative. Those questions really quickly are, why is your character adventuring? For what purpose? There are many ways of making good coin and in safer ways of making good coin. And why are you adventuring with this specific group of people? Now, this can be a difficult thing to answer. This can be a very difficult question to answer. But like you said, I always hold that if you're going to hold a campaign, the ultimate thing you can do is to get the group together beforehand. Sit them down and just discuss where you want to take the game, where it's going to kind of go. You don't have to give away any plot there. You just have to lay down some ground rules, let everybody bring their own house rule to the, reasonably speaking, to the game, and everybody sits down and comes up with a backstory. Now, maybe they've pre-written, maybe they've done, like you said, and met with the GM prior to this, but once everybody has a personal backstory, they can get together and create a party backstory. Now, I hate kicking a dead horse, but actually, I don't think that Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the 3rd edition, is a dead horse. It's just I tend to go to this a lot as an example, and that's because that is the role-playing game currently that I play most frequently. Anyway, I like how the designers thought about this from the get-go. They developed things called party sheets. Now, everybody knows that this game is it's not based on cards, but that's basically the main selling point, I guess, or mechanical drive, rules on cards, Anyway, they developed this idea called party sheets, and each party has a name and has a special ability and has a party tension meter, which is a way of driving the story, making things go faster or creating a sense of eeriness or whatever. By increasing the party tension meter, eventually it creates fatigue and stress in the group. But anyway, each of these has a pretty evocative name to it, like Oathbound or Ne'er-do-wells, or there's a bunch of them. There's like 12 or 15 of them currently, to my knowledge. And these are driving forces, and it's a really good way of getting them talking. And I've done this before where I just lay out the party sheets. They all look at the party sheets. So these are pre-generated ideas. You could write down a list if that's what you prefer, if you're playing a different system. But just really one-off evocative names so that the group can sit around, mull over it, and then try to work their backstories in together using that as a focal point for the story. And I think that works really well as far as creating the plot for the party is concerned. I think it is highly important that the players are involved in the process of creating their backstory. I have had the misfortune of having to have created several backstories, one recently for a player. And it's unfortunate. Well, I guess that's unfair to say. We talked about it at length previously. We were playing a D&D campaign that was derailed, and we kind of ported the character over and changed it slightly for the preferences of the player. But really, there was no thought into how to put it into the world. And we didn't really discuss the world. I tried to discuss it, but it was more like talking at him than with him about the development of this character. And that's an unfortunate that's unfortunate, but that's a skill that GMs need to have too, is the ability to create these backstories for players who necessarily aren't keen to do it or aren't capable of doing it to their capabilities or desire. But players need to be involved, in my opinion. Even if the GM is coming up with the majority of the ideas or giving them lots of seeds so that they can grow their own story, it is important that they're there and engaging themselves in it, because essentially this is their character that they are going to drive through the story. Very important. Another thing that I have written down here on my handy notes, because I'm a little bit, I lack short-term memory, let's say. Anyway, I think that the story doesn't have to be unique. There are many different archetypes in the world out there. I'll show you a couple examples. There are many different archetypes. The tarot deck is really awesome, I find, for doing this. There's all sorts of archetype for characters within this deck right here. And essentially, no matter what story you write, it's not going to be totally unique. You will find an instance of that in historical writing, in fiction, in something. You will find pieces of your backstory. So uniqueness isn't imperative. It's more so a desire to play that type of character or that story. And you'll always be able to add, essentially by you creating something, it is unique, even if it is based on other things, because you're creating that. However, you're standing on the shoulder of giants, or shoulders of giants, I should say. I think another important thing too is backstory can be developed over a series of adventures. You can write it as you go, but you do need a solid plot. Those two questions, essentially, like you said, Mark, are imperative. They have those two questions down. Everything else can kind of be fleshed out as you go along. As things happen to your character, that can trigger ideas for writing things into later, later into the story. If your character is exceptionally lucky, let's say, in the first couple or adventures, you can say something. He was born under a good sign or something like that, because you're rolling really good for the first few adventures. Or he did some good deed. In Warhammer terms, he pleased Renald in some sort of way, so he's lucky. So that's another thing. So it's not imperative to have like a fully fleshed out backstory, 3 pages of epic backstory for your character. That's really awesome if you want to document your adventure, your campaign, documented in a journalistic fashion. That's really cool, because essentially we're telling a story. They make movies and document them. They document stories and everything. You're telling a story. You might as well document it while you're doing it. It's an experience, and it's an experience that can be relived and enjoyed. I've done it before. There's lots of good resources out there on the internet of people documenting their campaigns. Few really good ones on YouTube too. It's so like I was saying there, it's ongoing. The story constantly evolves. The backstory can be continually written. Don't worry about that. And the last thing I want to touch on is that it is the greatest thing for a GM, as far as I am concerned, as far as my tastes are concerned, to have players willing to do this, to have reason behind their character, because then they become more interested in their motives, and that drives their decision making better. Good role players, good players will have that ability where they think about their character and they will act not necessarily in first person. They don't have to be like, "Oi, I want to smash your face in." They don't have to do that. They can, Lucas Haas does this, Lucas Haas says this. That doesn't matter. But as long as they're motivating their character according to their character's motivations, as long as they're choosing how to go about situations according to their character, that's great. And there's always exceptions to rules. People do things that are offbeat and off of their character, but that's it. Anyway, so that's the response portion to your question, and now I'm going to kind of talk about a mechanical thing and kind of give a little bit of input of my own. So basically, during character development, like you were saying, it's really good and challenging to write a backstory and then try to create a character that fits the backstory. That is very difficult to do and excellent. That's really good practice. There's a few things I like to do for players. I'll shuffle up, or I'll more than likely I'll have them shuffle up the deck of tarot cards, and they'll do this. I'll do this for creating NPCs too. Just slight fleshing out of the backstory. So I pull out the cards, draw 3. Ooh, looks like there's lots of wands here. So I'll tell some sort of story from this. This looks like a character. This looks like a guy, Page of Wands. Well, I know, I've read into this stuff before, so I know that wands represents fire and passion. So he's a passionate, young, upstart kind of character. It can be male or female, it doesn't matter. And then we drew this one, which I do believe is the 8 of Wands in a reversed fashion. So it looks like some sort of conflict. They look like they are in motion. However, the card is in reverse. So maybe this person is young and fiery and excited, but unused to combat. Maybe. So they're green when it comes to combat. Okay, never been in a fight before in their life. And I don't know, it looks like a good deed. Cups usually represents water and emotion. So, and 6 is an interesting number, but it's right after 5, which is one of the most chaotic numbers in numerology. But anyway, so it looks like there's a good deed. Could have something to do with a young sister. So for a backstory, he cares for his younger sister, like you were saying. In your example, maybe your sister was married to this guy for party purposes. But so this could be a green to combat character who cares for his sister. Maybe his sister was kidnapped. Maybe his sister is just young and the land is threatened by some evil force, or some force that's likely to affect her livelihood. So he's motivated to save her. Anyway, that's just an example of how to use the tarot deck to tell story. And I also like, when I write my backstory, I kind of like to do it in tandem with creating my character. As I'm creating my character, I want to be writing a backstory, thinking about his motivations. So in Warhammer parlance, you pick a career, basically. And it's very similar to this is the mechanic for choosing a character, rules as written. You shuffle up the deck of career cards, you draw 3. If it matches your race that you've picked, if the career is coherent with race, then you can choose one of those 3, and then you build your character from there. I let my characters just pick their character because it lends to them having an easier time telling story, creating backstory and telling story, and being more engaged in their player, liking their player more. That's a better way for newer players. For older players, I think generation is good, because then it gives them the opportunity, or kind of forces their hand a little bit to mix it up, to play different characters. And so if you want, say you wrote in your backstory that your character climbed a lot, lived in the mountains or lived near the mountains and was an avid climber, loved to climb. So you shuffle up the career cards, pull out your career, you select it, and you want to select one with as you're making your choice. You've decided that you want your character to be a good climber. You would find one in Warhammer Fantasy parlance that had athletics as one of its career skills, and then you would take that and place, and then you would pay for oh shit, I'm forgetting what I'm even talking about here. Oh yeah, you'd pay your creation points to train athletics as a skill, because you wrote that into your backstory. So that's another example, I guess, for how you could go about creating backstory for your character. So all sorts of ways. I'd love to hear the community's response to this. They're in comment form or video form, how they like to drive backstory. maybe what's a backstory you've created? What are some ideas or archetypes? I don't challenge everybody, but I mean, I suggest if you have a deck of tarot cards handy, you try to use that, especially if you're a game master for creating NPC characters. You just draw 3 cards and just intuit. Look at the pictures. Do a little bit of research on numbers. If it's reversed, you change the meaning, and yeah, it's a good way to go about it. Anyway, I'm really enjoying your videos, Mark. I hope the community is keen on this idea. Go backstory. Keep gaming, guys.